This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of the podcast, you can. You can email quocast@outlook.com. That's quocast@outlook.com. You can tweet at the Quo-Cast on Twitter, or check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/the Quo-Cast. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe on your favourite podcast provider, and check out video versions and other bits and pieces on YouTube as well. On this podcast, I talk to the legend known as Baz Barry of Predatür and Baz Barry's Spare Parts. I caught up with him via WhatsApp after seeing him at the convention late last year. I saw you recently at the convention playing with Baz Barry's Spare Parts. We didn't meet, but I saw you playing. How was the convention for you?
I really loved it, and I didn't go back to playing with John when I was after I'd sort of recovered from my illness, which I expected to. And there was a point where I was really bothered about that, and then there was a point where I wasn't bothered about that, and so the opportunity of playing, almost with my band, but with Jay, who's phenomenal. I've got a clip of him. We used to invite him up to jam with us when he was about 10. and it was better than us then, and he's sort of phenomenal now. So I think, how do I put this? So in a way, I don't have to answer to anybody in terms of what I want to do in terms of Quo numbers. I can just do exactly what I want. And that's sort of really quite fulfilling and really satisfying. I sort of get to play the songs that I really like. I'm not fussed about playing all the hits. I never have. So in a way, it was a sort of real triumph to do all those numbers that sort of never get done, and to sort of do them with these fantastic people that I play with. I'm so easily the worst player in any group of people I ever play with. So I'm getting as much out of it as the audience, because it's like, wow, this is fantastic. These guys are brilliant, and I sort of try and fumble my way through a few chords. And I think the only sort of the regret is that you couldn't go out and do it, in a pub or a club as playing a load of Quo numbers, because they're not Quo numbers that anybody recognises. Almost, not even some Quo fans were like, what is this? That sort of appeals to me, that slightly outside the box thing. I mean, I'd love to play it every week almost, then I could get really good, learn all the lyrics properly. I've got all the chords written down and all the lyrics, just because I think we had 2 rehearsals for that gig. We'd played some of the numbers before about 3 years ago, and then Jay came down, and he drove down from Glasgow to rehearse, and Jack wasn't there. It was only Steve and I, in this room. And then Jack lives in Norwich, and then we all congregated in Norwich for a final rehearsal. But it was only like a 3-hour rehearsal, because Jay had to start sort of driving back. So, that performance with the sort of, 1.5 rehearsals in 3 years and songs that we'd never played before, was sort of quite phenomenal. I was really sort of proud of who I played with, and I'm really thrilled that most people seem to really enjoy it. It was a bit different, and that was the plan. So I'm, really lucky to play with these people, really, and and still be sort of part of this Quo scene, sort of a little bit on the outside these days, really, but it's still nice to be thought of and welcomed, and people still want to chat to you and have their photo taken with you. It is quite humbling. I'm really lucky. So yeah, I did enjoy it. Absolutely.
As did I. Your set was described, I think, as a connoisseur Quo set, because it was sort of that 60s and mid-70s, early to mid-70s thing going on. To go right back to it, one of the things I do on the podcast is ask you how you got into Status Quo, Baz.
Right. Okay. So I am actually, I I suppose, so I wasn't allowed records as a kid, as my mum thought they were a terrible waste of money. So I grew up on my mum and dad's records. So my mum was into early sort of Cliff. So I really love early Cliff. And my dad actually had really, really terrible hearing. He had 60%, 40% hearing. And so he always had to wear hearing aids. And I don't know how he heard anything at all, really, to be honest. And it was a classic example of my dad going to the doctor and saying, "Oh, I've got a bad ear." And the doctor saying, "Oh, yeah, you have." And he said, "No, no, that's my good ear. This is my bad ear." So, so my dad sort of like Shirley Bassey. So I brought up on all these '60s records, and so I used to listen to the radio and try and sort of remember every tiny moment. So, I mean, the reason I have long hair is because I saw the Move doing Fire Brigade on the TV. It must have been a black and white clip, and I didn't know it was Roy Wood, but he had. I thought he had long hair, and that's the reason I've got long hair is because of Roy Wood, and then because you don't have an older brother, you don't get introduced to stuff. You have to find it out for yourself, which makes you sort of quite a late starter. So I was born in 1960, so all that glam rock, when I was 12 or 13, God, it's just phenomenal. I still love it all now, but I was a massive Bolan fan, and I still am. He's still my main man. He's the one I still listen to. And then I think the first single I ever bought, I think I was on holiday and I saw Hawkwind do Silver Machine. And that was just really phenomenal. And I think that was the first single I ever bought. And then I think I bought Rain. I think I sent my sister to go and buy it because I was too shy to go into the record shop. Then I really, really loved that. And then I bought On the Level, and that was it. I'd sort of discovered it, really, but, sort of way too late. Mick, who was my sort of Predator stablemate for years and years and years, he was boarding school, and they sort of got into all that stuff much earlier, and I've always envied people that a bit, really. But before that, and almost the key thing was when I was at junior school, there were 3 girls having acoustic guitar lessons. So I was in Thorley, which is near Bishop Stortford, and I was a really shy child, and there were 3 girls, and they used to have acoustic guitar lessons at the big school, and I was desperate. My whole life I wanted guitar lessons, but I was just too shy. And Mary Smith was the main guitarist, and they sort of used to play like Yellow Bird, do 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 do. So Mary Smith would play the lead, and then I think it was Jackie Parker who could just about play drum drum drum, the quick change chords, and then the other girl who couldn't really change chords, she just used to hammer the back of her guitar like bongos. But there was a guy, and I don't remember his name, but it absolutely is a total pivotal moment in my life. I was hanging about listening to them, desperate to have a go or even hold a guitar. And Mary Smith said to this student teacher, and I can't remember his name, she said, "Can you play anything, sir?" And he said, "The only thing I can play is this." And it is still burning in my mind. He grabbed this acoustic guitar, he put one foot on the desk, and he put it on his knee, and he made that kind of bar chord shape, and he went do, 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 and it was like, oh my God. And I sort of summed up the courage to ask him, and he showed me a couple of times, but it was impossible. I couldn't remember how to do it. And so that must have been about 67, 68, probably, possibly 69. But that was the pivotal moment. It's like I had to play that style of guitar. So that was that then, but it took me till I was 16 to to actually buy an electric guitar. So I was into Quo. So I'd gone from bowling to sort of riding schoolboy motocross to getting back into music, and the single Rain, which is still a fantastic song. And then I bought On the Level, and then I went from there. So I really loved it. And then I suppose I got Blue for You, and then when I left school, I bumped into a mate who I knew at school, but we weren't really mates, but we became mates after school, and that was Steve Coppock, the original Predator bass player. Then he was a printing apprentice, and he was on about 3 times what I was. I was on 36p an hour. And so we used to go into town and buy all these Quo records, and just, God, we absolutely adored them. It was amazing. So, yeah, that's how I got into Quo, a bit later than a few other people. I think the first time we saw them was the Daily Mirror Rock and Pop Awards at Bingley Hall. And my mum made me wear a jacket because she didn't want me to look scruffy. So we were only just about 17. And so, we went up there, and there's all these sort of denim cad, hairy northerners, setting light to things. It was, that was phenomenal. And I really loved them. Really, absolutely obsessed. Just thought it was everything. I used to sort of try and iron my hair straight to be a bit more like Francis, all that stuff you do when you're sort of naive. Because the other thing as well is that, the 70s, they were naive. We didn't know anything about anything, then. I mean, you couldn't work out the songs. You had to try and slow the records down to try and work out lyrics. I remember we were trying to work out the lyrics to Route 66. It's just impossible. And when you look at the original lyrics compared to what you were trying to sing, it's like, how did I get to that from that? But, that's how it was at the time. We're all like that. I mean, now I want to learn how to play anything, I go on YouTube, and there's normally some 14-year-old who does it 10 times better than I ever could. Everybody knows everything now, but you didn't know it then. We didn't even have guitar tuners. So, yeah, that was, yeah.
As you may know, with the podcast, I do ask for questions beforehand, and I've got a few that I would like to shoot your way. Michael asked me when you were going to get a haircut and a shave.
Well, actually, basically, there's 2 reasons I've got a beard. One is when I was ill, I was diagnosed with esophageal cancer sort of 6 years ago, which is why I had to bail from John. And that's an awful one to try and get through, but I was really lucky and obviously got brilliant support, got through it. But so I've had a couple of crowns. I'm sort of the generation that's got really bad teeth. None of my children have ever had a fill-in, but I've got a couple missing, which I'm really self-conscious of. And also, when I sort of reformed a sort of new lineup of Predator, I didn't want to look like I did when I was with John. Almost, it was like a weird sort of personal reinvention. I had to not disassociate myself, but it was like it was a new beginning. And I never used to really have a beard with John because I suppose I just didn't. So, and trying to get through a cancer treatment, it's like the last thing you're worried about is anything else. Is just a hour by hour, day by day thing. So that was it. And I did actually lose most of my hair when I was on chemo. So it's gradually grown back. It grew back brown and really coarse, but now luckily it's gone grey again. So yeah, when I sort of get a couple of my teeth fixed, I will shave my beard off just to see what I look like. I'm really bored with it as well at the moment. So yeah, one day I don't intend on ever having my sort of hair cut short. I've had long hair so long, I don't even think about it. I wouldn't even describe myself as having long hair. I just don't think about it. But having said that, when the new growth started coming through, I cut what was left of the old growth growth off, and it was kind of shoulder length. It was sort of like a Lennon-y sort of length, and I actually really liked that, because it was just, I looked so different from how I'd looked for sort of 45 years or whatever, however old I am. So I started growing my hair when I was about 15, but I'm just not brave enough to sort of cut it short again, really. So it's not something I ever think about, but yeah, I am bored with my beard, and as soon as I can get my teeth sorted, I will. That's romantic. I will shave it off, because I look like Catweasel's dad. So yes, to the point I will. I'm unlikely to cut my hair off, but I will get rid of the beard when I. There you go.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dan wants to know whether you've got any sort of memories of playing with John.
Yeah, hundreds. I really love playing with John, and I consider it a sort of massive privilege. I think that I was really proud of sort of what we did with John as well. I think at the time he sort of, John Coghlan's Quo, had, before we sort of joined it, the wheels were starting to come off. I realised that everything actually has a finite life, and I mean, we had the odd Mad Turk moments, but actually he's really kind, and he's really funny, and he's a fantastic player. And a couple of sort of real Nirvana moments. When we first got together, we were just going to go out as the John Coghlan band and just play Quo album material, because I've never been interested in playing the singles. That doesn't interest me. It's album tracks that I really like. And we got introduced by a friend, and I think we were in Carterton Football Club Hall or something. It was, it was like a hall. It was, a tatty old sort of place. And we obviously, he's actually quite shy, and we didn't really. We'd only met him once in a pub, and it was like, this is massive for Mick and I. Mick and I have been obsessed with Quo for forever, and that's how we met. So we was like, oh, what should we play? And nobody really knew. And it's like, let's do In My Chair. It's really quite gentle. And we started playing it, and Mick and I, we were just grinning from ear to ear, and we finished it. And it was at that point that I realised that the Quo that I really liked was all about the drums. Once you took John away, for me, it wasn't Quo anymore. And I realised that where I thought I'd been listening to guitarists my whole life, I realised actually I'd been listening to drummers my whole life. And it was John that made Quo, that era of Quo, so fantastic. The minute he'd gone, something was lost that for me never sort of returned. And I sort of realised, Jimmy Page, he felt that Zeppelin couldn't go on without Bonham. And so I understand that, just how good Don Powell was, and just how good Mick Tucker was. These people were like phenomenal. They were so part of the band. You don't seem to get that in the same way now, where everyone is sort of been to drum school or guitar school. Everybody's trained, and so you kind of lose that. You listen to Black Sabbath without Bill Ward. I mean, Bill Ward is phenomenal. And so I realised that I'm a massive fan of the Pink Fairies, Twink and Russell Hunter, and Bill Legend from Bolan. These songs are fantastic, but the drums on all of them are just glorious. And John's playing, that was it. It's like, oh my word. I thought, there's me, ironing my hair when I was a teenager. I didn't for very long, because I did realise quite early on that there already was a Francis, and he was very good at it, and I didn't want to be Francis, but I could be influenced by Francis. I'd had a Urco Flex 50 plectrum. That's what Francis used, and I played Telecaster because that, even though I didn't really like them, that's what Francis was playing on the front of the live EP. All these things that I think there's a picture on sort of Mark Ellie where he's sort of wearing bassy boots. It's like, oh, so I had those, all that stuff. And actually, and, this white Telecaster business and green Telecaster business. I mean, Mick's never owned a Telecaster. It's like, that wasn't important. The secret ingredient to sounding like Quo was to have John on the drums. That's really sort of quite phenomenal, and it all hinges on that for me. That's my own personal view, obviously. So it's been brilliant. We've had loads of really nice times. There's probably thousands of stories. One that was really weird. Oh, where were we playing? Oh, we turned up in a crew bus. Oh, we were in France, and it was John Coghlan's Quo, and it wasn't a very big gig. And the door slid open, and a bloke looked in, and he saw John. He went, "Oh, hello, John." He said, "Where's Francis?" So, "Oh yeah, Francis." France in a little van, all crammed in the back. It's weird, but he was awesome. I love him, and I've been speaking to him recently, and I hope to get him up, and we're going to do a couple of numbers, in Glasgow, which will be really nice, fantastic. Yeah, I loved playing with him. He was phenomenal. I've always said he's the heartbeat of Quo. It's massively important, and he was important to Quo. Yeah, awesome.
Well, definitely so. I'm so glad that he got to reunite with the rest of the guys in 2013, 14. Because I think then you realised what a difference it made.
Yeah. When you think, because they were all getting on a bit. I mean, John is, what is he, 74? Is he now? It's like, well, I'm 63, so it's hard to sort of. It's hard to manage people's expectations, really. I think, especially with drums. I think guitar, as long as you've got your ears and you're not suffering too much from rheumatism, you can sort of get away with it, really. Yeah, no, I'm really pleased. No, and I took my youngest son Albert to see him, and it's like, this is, and you sort of got that excitement. But the really, really weird thing is that because they're all using in-ear monitors, I think that makes you really detached from an audience. And as they announced they were coming on, the cheer was so loud. I think, was it Hammersmith Odeon? I think it was. Like the gig, the volume inside the gig, the sound almost compressed, where it was so loud that the joy and the sound almost became a physical thing.
Yes, I remember.
It really, John was sort of wearing in ears that like everybody does, and he was like, "Oh, how did it go?" And it's like, what? It was just, you could the air was almost solid. You could almost sort of squeeze it through your hands. That atmosphere there was so much love, and yet you got this modern in-ear monitoring, and it was like it completely detached. He said, "I don't really know how it went," and it's like, oh, that's what a waste that was, But yeah, I'm glad I was there. I'm glad they did it. I'm sort of glad for Alan as well, and because it's easy to overlook Alan's contribution to the era that I sort of really loved. When you look at, that no, those songs were often, Francis and Bob, but all the riff-based stuff, don't think it matters. You got Backwater, you got A Year, Unspoken Words. They're Alan. Those really great riff songs were Alan. Drifting Away. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it was really great. People did get the because I mean, it's really hard. There's two generations of Quo fans, isn't it, that are completely removed. I mean, Rhino's been in the band longer than Alan ever was. It's hard to relate the timeline, because I didn't stop listening to Quo by Can't Stand the Heat album, but I was certainly looking at them and going, what is this? I can't relate to this at all. There was a golden moment for me, which I've always stuck with, to be fair. Yeah.
Hence why with Spare Parts, you sort of go up to 75 and then stop, which, is good because a lot of the other bands will play the hits and the stuff that they did later on.
Well, I mean, I'm sort of really out of touch. I've really just done my own thing. So, because I mean, heavy traffic, that's like an era of Francis, that's an era of Quo that I've been invited to see occasionally. But, that's a whole new thing. And, sort of Brino plays in the style of Rhino, sort of not Alan. It's like, oh my word, I sort of left it sort of not far behind, but it's sort of grown. It's so vast, that whole Quo thing. There's so many interpretations. There's quite a few different lineups now. I suppose at some point you're going to get a sort of a Richie Malone rhythm guitarist in a band, aren't you? And it's like, I sort of can't knock that, because ultimately you've got to be out there trying to play guitar, and that becomes more and more difficult in this age. You just got to get out there and play. So, I remember the joy of sort of trying to work out a Quo number and play it. And actually, I just encourage everybody to do that.
I'm certainly picking up the guitar again and trying to play some of that stuff because, as you say, there's a wide variety of different styles in there, different eras, and I think what I picked up from the convention was that there is a younger generation of Quo fans who are going to pick it up. It's not going to die out.
No, and that's not ever something you could foresee. You think it's sort of your music, or your era of music, and that's it. That it is. It's like, it's like you got sort of grandkids that are Quo fans. It's like, what? How does that work? It is hard to, let's say that timeline. It's been so long since 74 or 77, and so much has happened, and so many people have sort of got into it. I think one, because you've got 76, 77 came in all the punk rock things. So you've got this sort of big melting pot, which Predator was sort of a bit like. So you've got a sort of, obviously Steve and I had a massive Quo influence, but the original guitarist, John Benham, he was only about 6 months older than me, but he was sort of massive influence, and obviously I never realised it at the time. But he listened to all sorts of stuff, from Hillies to Zeppelin to Fairies, and that really expanded my interest in the possibilities of music.
I was going to ask you about Predator because you're booked to play at the Scottish convention in two bands again. I mean, number one, how do you maintain the energy to play in two bands? And number two, what can we expect from a Predator set? Because you've released 3 albums over the last sort of 20 years. What can we expect?
I don't know yet. I haven't decided what to do. I mean, obviously the Predator of today is different to the Predator of Mean in Your Garden, but the Predator of today is more like the original Predator, and it's a broader thing. You just go for it and see what happens. So I don't know yet. Maybe try a couple of new numbers. I haven't really thought that far ahead. It's just nice to have a gig. It's obviously difficult because we only do 1 or 2 sort of Predator gigs a year, so it's quite, you don't have that the constant, or not constant, the regular rehearsals where you're trying stuff out. I mean, I really want to get another album sorted, but it just hasn't worked out. It's been really difficult last 3 years for bands, especially difficult for bands playing original music. I mean, I just got a gig booked in Holland in May at the Cross Guitars Festival, and it's an absolute nightmare trying to sort out carnets and getting a band over for one gig. This Brexit business has just been horrendous. So I don't know what I'm going about Predator yet, but I am looking forward to it. I love being in the same room as those guys. You never know what's going to happen, which is a joy. And I always look forward to playing with Jay, and I really like those Quo numbers. I don't know if we'll try a couple of different ones. It's a bit too far ahead. I'm thinking about Holland at the moment, so I'll have to get my arse into gear a bit nearer the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to try and get you back on the podcast to talk about that in more detail, because, like you say, you're thinking of the next thing.
Yeah, I think that you do, and it's almost like you try and write something that you think is going to be okay, but actually it's other people that give it a meaning or a value almost. You can't second guess what people are going to like. I know that an interview with Francis was saying, he always sort of really liked Claudie, or, and you sort of, for a while, I thought, you're taking the piss. It's like, oh my God, it's like, you've written down, and, and sort of don't waste my time. And, you played this awesome solo on Little Lady, and you just and Blue Eyed Lady. And it's like, oh my word, all this. But you're sort of going for Claudie. And it's like, so it's a bit, the songs of mine that I've sort of written aren't necessarily the songs that people really like. You can't second guess it, but also you just have to be, really sort of humbled that, people listen to them at all, even, let alone sort of really like them. People put their own value, they invest their own emotions into these songs, however it sort of touches them. And actually, it's not for me to say. It's like, yeah, some of them I like, some of them I absolutely can't stand, and some of them I wrote when I was 17. It's like, or 18. It's like, somebody asked for the lyrics to Need Your Love. He couldn't make them out. And it's like, is my singing that bad? And I had to sort of listen back to make sure I wasn't just making up what I thought they were. And it's like, it's incredibly unremarkable. I mean, I think, I'm 63. I wrote that when I was 18, or, it's like it can't have any relevance, or, over the top. Some of the lyrics I try really hard, but some of the lines are like, that's terrible. But, having said that, there are some really terrible lyrics in some really amazing songs, which I wouldn't put up with. I think Kate Bush, Wuthering Heights, she says, I pine a lot, I find the lot quite hard without you. Something's like, that's terrible. How can you just, that'll do? No, that's not good enough. So I am a bit like that. I really like my lyrics to work, but I can't make any excuses for stuff that was written 50 years ago or whatever it was. I just have to mumble the words I don't like when I'm singing them live, or just blot them out of my mind. It is, yeah, it's like, oh my God, yeah. But I have been around quite a long time, not achieving very much really, but it still has been fulfilling, because I've done what I wanted to do, and that I sort of having sort of faith in not just myself, but actually the faith in the people that I play with. I think that's the key. I always know it's going to be fantastic, not because of me, but because of who I get to play with. I have tremendous faith in those people, and I've been really lucky. Everyone I've played with has been utterly brilliant. So, if there's sort of been success, I put it down to the fact that I've been really lucky that awesome players have wanted to play with me, if that makes sense.
It does. That's a very humble thought, though, because I think you're almost downplaying your role in a lot of things, and I can understand why. It's really interesting because for me, you said earlier about how people kind of put their own meaning onto the music, and for me, about 10 years ago, I went through a breakup, and I think I listened to Mean back to back several times because for some reason it like the musicality of it and the lyrics and everything just kind of met with what I was thinking and feeling at the time. And it's, you know, it's amazing how music can do that, can just kind of fit that.
I think so, because sometimes you don't think about the stuff you do intentionally, but I always thought that the Francis, the Rossi Young lyrical relationship was pretty awesome. You always put these songs down to Francis, but actually lyrically, a lot of the time they're down to Bob Young. And I always liked the way they could say something really simple and it sounded really ordinary, but it said so much. That was so different to, Mark Bolan's, drivel that came out. My, my my Toad Road licked a wheel like a saber. It's like I don't do that stuff that Bolan did. Uh, but Francis, it's like, yeah, I found her in a nowhere and I lost her, or I saw the light, or Railroad. These are just absolutely, they're just sort of glorious. They're really ordinary, but you can just relate to almost every line. Every line is almost sublime, certainly up to sort of certainly up to Blue for You. I'm going to go for that, and so there is not a conscious effort, it's a semi-conscious effort, but there's something really beautiful in those lyrics that where you can say something quite ordinary along with the melody and the guitar, and it's just so perfect. So I understand that, and I would say that on a personal level, probably the lyrics to In Your Garden, the track In Your Garden, it's like, yes, I feel I've really done that. Every line is just like something maybe Francis would have done or Bob Young would have done. And if I'd have heard it, I'd have gone, oh, that's awesome. So, yeah, no, I sort of get that. And I always sort of tried to do that. I don't have a futuristic lyrical sense, so my lyrical sense would be from Francis and Bob, probably, if I haven't thought about that sort of deeply, but thinking about that now, yeah, there is that kind of ordinariness is just brilliant, because it's so hard, I think, to do as well. They've done it all so well for so long. It's hard to find a little Quo type song that doesn't sound like, oh, that's Big Fat Mum, I've just rewritten Big Fat Mama, or I've just rewritten Run. That's really difficult, and I think that is why there's never been a room for another boogie band in real terms. They've been so good for so long. There's no chance. Predator wasn't like, it's like, I think we might be one up from the sort of pub league, but there isn't that love for another band doing that, and they did it all so well. It's like almost from sort of 71 to sort of, I'm going to say, up to Blue for You. It's hard to find a Duff track on a Quo album, apart from Fine, Fine, Fine. I'm going to stick my neck out there and go, I know Francis is into country music, but I really hate that song. But I know every line and I can still hum the tune, because that you have to sit through it in order to get The Lonely Man. Didn't you bother to lift off the record? And I think that is why with Weedon House, because that album, because I knew it was going to be different. It wasn't going to be Mean and In Your Garden, and it was a sort of completely new lineup. It sort of had to come out on vinyl. I wanted people to have a relationship with the cardboard. That's why it's got a poster and a booklet, because I think if I'd have bought that out on CD, it's really easy to go, oh, no, what is that? 30 seconds. Oh, no, what? That's no good. And we couldn't do that in our day. So, I remember sort of buying an album for a specific track. But because you listen to the whole album, you end up tracks grow on you that you adore in the end far more than the track you bought the album for. And so I needed to do that with Wicker House, really. I couldn't take the risk that people would just go, oh, that's not mean, it's not in your garden, zip, 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 and not have to, it's like, actually, if you don't like a track on Wicker House, you have to get up and move the needle. And for the most part, you can't be bothered. So by the time you start through the torture of a track that you really hate, you're onto a track that you don't mind, and then they grow on you. And when I look back, we don't sort of talk about great songs, we talk about great albums, and I don't think that you can do that these days. It is that relationship with vinyl. It's a long-term thing. It's nearly a sort of lifetime thing. In actual fact, I've just sold my record deck and most of my vinyl because I realised with all the vinyl I've got, I only play about 10 LPs. So that happens. So lyrically, Francis is awesome, and
I think a lot of people would agree with you there on many of the points that you raised. I'm going to let you go because I know that you're obviously very busy. You've got Holland to plan for. What's the gig in Holland?
Cross Guitars Festival. When we brought out Mean, and we only brought out Mean as those songs had existed, and so this is almost like, it's like before the internet, and didn't even know there were other Quo bands out there. In fact, we got introduced to State of Quo, which was, I think, Mikey, Graham, Paul, and Mark lineup. This is years and years ago. We went to see them, and it's like, oh my word, this is a whole new world. And so we recorded Mean literally because we'd been playing the songs with the lineup then, which was Simon and Glenn and Mick. And we recorded them just because I wanted the songs preserved, because I just had a son. He was only young. And it's like, so I wanted to be able to say, this is what your useless dad tried to do with his life. And sort of Mean sort of gradually it took off. And then out of the blue, I think we got would it have been an email or a phone call, or somebody contacted us and said, well, could you come and play in Holland? We're massive fans of this album. And so we didn't know anything. We drove there. It's like never been abroad playing before. We drove there, and like about sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock, I think, we got to in the afternoon, we got to this crossroads in the north of Holland, and there's this music cafe, just a little cafe, and it's like we'd driven hours and hours, and it's like, is this it? This can't be it. Really? Bloody hell, what have we done? And of course, it was the most awesome gig that we've ever played. It's just, we've had some fantastic nights there, and people come from far and wide, and the Dutch really kind of took on sort of Mean. And it was before the days of limited people in, or even stopping at any time of night. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it just felt like hundreds and hundreds of people just going absolutely mad were rammed in this place. And so we've been invited back there. I don't know if it's the 10th anniversary, 15th. I don't even know what anniversary it is. I didn't write that down. But we played the first Cross Guitar Festival. We had the honour of headlining that, and so it has a really special place. And gradually over the years, people from the UK sort of turn up there as well. It's just been really mental. So I've got to try and find a way of getting the gear there now. It's with Brexit. Who voted for that? What a nightmare. Where you could just get in a van and go and play. Now it's really, really, really difficult. So thank you everyone that voted for that, for whatever you voted for that for. You've given me a real shitty time trying to get over there.
We saw a little bit of that during the convention with Sound of Status.
Oh yeah. Well, that's made me so paranoid. Joachim, Joachim, he's sort of gorgeous. And the year that we played, Predatür played it with the new lineup, and I didn't really know him, and was chatting to him after the gig, and he was like, and he really loved it, and it was the year Rick had died, and Joachim had come on, and he sort of looked like Rick in sort of 73 when before he had his hair cut short, before all that rocking all over the world and the live thing, when it was like hello length. And he's just like, he was just fantastic. And it was massive for people. It was almost like Rick lived. It was really, really amazing. And yeah, and he couldn't get there. And he'd driven something like 30 hours from Sweden because his flight was cancelled and they wouldn't let him in. And it's like, that's horrific. So people missed out on a really awesome bloke and a really awesome player and a fantastic band. And ultimately, they're the chances that we get to see people that we've known and admired. These are the gigs where we all sort of say, hello, how you doing? Fantastic to see you. Keep well. It was an awesome set. We all get to admire each other. And yeah, we missed out on that. Yeah, I'm really paranoid now. But I think a carnet, in order to get your gear out of the country and back, is something like 475 quid. I think up to 15 grand. It's like, oh, great. So, I'm either going to have to go out with my guitar in bits and try and smuggle it out under my car like the day of the jack. Or borrow everybody's everything. I mean, how do you perform if you're borrowing somebody's guitar and somebody's amp? And, people always judge you on your performance, not on the fact that you've had to walk there or, sort of thing. It's, really difficult. So I hope that we rejoin. And it's all my friends as well. It's like everybody I know, proper, pro players and semi-pro players. Everybody's about to stop. It's all right if you're Quo, you just stick another $5 on the ticket, don't you? And everything's covered and people pay it. But for everybody else, your grandchildren that are in a Quo band and want to go and play in France or Holland or Spain or Germany and have been invited,
where the audience is.
Certainly for boogie. I mean, so the Dutch, they listen to rock radio. It isn't like here. And that rock bands, rock music is still massive on the continent. In a way, for here it's sort of, there's more pockets of it. Really, it doesn't feel quite the same, But yeah, they really messed it up for everyone, apart from the people that can afford it. It's just the rest of us, really. So yeah, it's difficult. So yeah, I'm just trying to learn some French. I didn't understand. Please let me go through. I'll do anything. I've just got to learn that in French. Please, I'll do anything. How much can I pay? We've had, 30 years of not giving it a thought. All those gigs with John, it's like we either flew out with guitars, or we just drive out in a van or a tour bus. It just went. It was just fantastic. It was just really easy, and it allowed you to expand your horizons. It allowed people to book you. It was just been these fantastic experiences that I've had. My love for Europe and all the people I've met, all the French and the Germans and the Dutch. It's like, they're like brothers to me. That's how strong the friendship is. All through music, all through being able to just get in a car and go on the tunnel and go. But, now it's like, how much is my friendship worth? Well, it's going to be about 475 quid on top of whatever it was going to cost. Now it's like, oh, yeah, shocking, really terrible. I could go on, and I could swear a lot, but I won't. I keep my.
Well, I've got a bleeper here if that helps.
Yeah, yeah. I really could. Rest assured, even though I haven't sworn, in my head I'm absolutely furious. So yeah, no, I kind of won't subject anyone who listens to. Well, I mean, they obviously know what I'm like when I'm on the stage, but yeah, it's like, what were you thinking?
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's been a real honor. Thanks for thinking of me. Yeah, it is really, really great to be part of all of this on whatever level that I am. It is great to be included and feel included. And I think that's the key message. It is about being inclusive, not exclusive. You know, everybody's welcome. Everybody get up, have a go, do something. You know, this isn't an elitist sport. This is something that everyone should be involved with. Have a go. You never know, and you'll get something out of it, and that's the most important thing. It isn't about fame and fortune. Actually, it's about the people you meet and the songs you play and the gigs that you play. And some of them are awful, some of them are just absolutely glorious, and you'll never forget them. So that's cool. Yeah, no, anytime. Thank you for inviting me.